For this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate how to use completing the square to solve a quadratic when the solution is going to be imaginary roots. The first step, we're going to use the equation that I have up here. The first step is when we're solving for these roots, even though they're imaginary roots, we still want our y value to be 0. So we're going to set our equation 2x squared minus x plus 20 equal to 0. So the first step of the process is to isolate the x squared and the x on one side of the equal sign. So we want to subtract 20 from both sides. The second step is to find some term that we can place inside the equation that will, oh no, sorry. The second step is not to complete the trinomial yet. We need to get rid of the coefficient. So we're going to divide everything by 2. This gives us an x squared as our leading term. It gives us a negative 1/2 x as our middle term. We're going to leave room to complete that trinomial. And then on the right-hand side, it gives us a negative 10. The third step is when we want to find a term that will complete the trinomial. We find that by taking half of the linear term. So the linear term has a negative 1/2 as its coefficient. We take half of that, and then we square it. Half of a half is a quarter, and squared gives us 1/16. This is what we're going to add to both sides of the equation. Our fourth step is to write the binomial, the factored form of this quadratic. So we're going to factor this into a binomial by taking the square root of the first term, taking the sine of the middle term, and taking the square root of the last term. And then we have to combine these two numbers together, and I'm going to do that over here. We have a negative 10 plus 1/16. In order to combine these, they both need the same denominator. So in order for a 10 to have a denominator of 16, I have to multiply this by 16. And that gives us a negative 159/16. Just looking at it to make sure I didn't make any mistakes here. So we have a negative 160. We're adding 16 to it. We're adding 1 to it, and we get negative 159. That looks right to me. Okay. The next step is to take the square root of both sides. So when I do that, this is step 5. We're going to take the square root of the left-hand side and the square root of the right-hand side. The left-hand side gives me x minus 1/4, but we have a problem when we're on the right-hand side. As you can see, we have a negative inside the square root, and that gives us an imaginary number. One thing that we know is that if we have the square root of negative 1, we use the letter, lowercase letter I, to symbolize the square root of a negative number. So we want to pull that square root of the negative 1 out of the square root sign and pull that to the outside. And so that would be our I over here. And we also want to take the square root of 16. There is no square root of 159 that I can think of at the moment. So square root of 159. Actually, 3 goes into this. No, there is none. 53 times. And that's over the number 4. And because we've taken a square root, we have a positive and negative root. That doesn't change even though we're working with imaginary numbers. And now we want to isolate our x by adding 1/4 to both sides. And that gives us our solution. Now, when we have an I in the solution, that means this doesn't actually hit the x-axis. There is no x-intercepts. These are imaginary numbers because this parabola, because of this positive 20, has shifted up above the x-axis and will never hit the x-axis. And that's why we have an imaginary number for our answer.